In the last week, how many of you have used Google search? Did you feel guilty? No. Did you feel empowered? I'm finding it absolutely amazing of these capabilities that we are all faced with. And what brought me to this topic in the first place is, as we have changed the nature and the way in which we give and take information, I'm aware of the fact that most of us, all of us in this room, as a matter of fact, have probably finished all of our formal education, and that was defined with a curriculum that somebody else put forth to us. I'm thinking more in terms of young children and who are in school or not even have started school yet, and what the implications of all of this are. And what started me was the conversation that has probably gone on in 1,000 homes in the evening as the child is studying for a test and saying, why do I have to study this for some stupid test? If I need to know this, I can look it up. Google has become a verb. Let me just give you a couple of my examples on how this works. How far is Knoxville? How many miles is that? How long will it take me to drive that? What's the best route? What are the local movies? Let's look up a movie, see what's going on at the different theaters, and what time do they start? What time does that game start on television that I wanted to watch? Is robotic surgery, in this particular case, better or worse than conventional surgery? What are the strengths and weaknesses, the risks and the opportunities of one versus the other? Siri, what is the specific gravity of gold? Do I have any appointments? Oh, wait, I see that there's a birthday coming up here that's been provided to me. I have been guilty, this is my confession, of actually calling this thing my cerebral prosthesis. You know, the device for the lame brain. It helps me with so many things. But I'm trying to understand how things have changed over time and what the implications of that are. Well, one of the ways to describe why I think it matters more now than ever before is to give you my interpretation of the history of information. Let's start out with the issue of, let's go back to the early analog years. We have always relied on other people for information. That is how we learn. And along with a formal education, we constantly gain information in all sorts of forms. In the earliest years, we navigated with blazes on trees and rock cairns. And we asked people, where is the best place to hunt? What's the next watering hole? I have a story I'd like to share with you. Quite a few years ago, I had the good fortune of being in Barrow, Alaska on the North Slope. It was an overcast day in March. It was daylight, and it is flat in every direction, and the ocean is frozen. And I was wondering, and I looked to a native next to me, and I said, how far out do you have to pull your boats to get to open water? And he looks up, he scans around, and he looks at me, and he says, about 10 miles. How do you know that? He said, look at the sky. Back here, the snow and ice is reflected as white sky. See that line where it gets dark? That's the reflection of the open water. Information that he had, that he uses often, that he just taught me about. We have always done that. Well, we moved on to what I call the later analog years, and that's when we had even more of signs and printing and newspapers and books and libraries, television, radio, and we navigated with maps. It all gets better. And then we moved into the digital era. The early digital years gave us things like GPS, it gave us computers, and the most important thing that makes the difference between analog and digital information is two things. One is digital information copies perfectly. One digital file, the next one, this one's just as good as that one. You've seen a fax sent 3 times over, can't read it. Same principle. We also found that in the early digital years we navigated better we understood more information. It was still available to us, so we could start searching it. And then as we moved into what I call the last 5, 10 years of digital information, it's connected. The other point about digital information is we can search it. We can look through a lot of it at the same time. And that, along with the interface, has brought us to where we are with all this immense amount of information that we have available to us. It's amazing. And now we have moving maps that have the information of other things on them, and the terrain, and the weather, and where we're located. The interface just gets easier and more easy to use. We can even talk to it for doing that kind of stuff. The other factor that has changed significantly is what I call the push-pull. When you go and look for information, you would go in the index, or you'd go in the card catalog, or you would ask several people about it. Well, now we can search even more for doing that. We can pull information to us, and we do it all the time. That's what Google search did for us when we did that. And it happens in a fraction of a second for doing that. Along with that, we have more information pushed to us. The first one that comes to mind is junk mail. And there's an interaction between that, because as we go to certain places and search things, other information is identified and pushed to us. That stuff around the margins on the web page where there's some content that you wanted, there's some other stuff. I'm sure a lot of you have been distracted from time to time because you saw something interesting over there. Oh, I think I'll go check that out, see how that works. The other part of that is we push more information out as we request information, as we search for things, as we apply for things. All of that is part of that push-pull. But what I want to identify here in very, very broad categories, what are those things that we need to have inboard? The stuff that we need to know now. Well, let me give you 2 contrasting stories with completely different outcomes to highlight one of those categories. Let's take Asiana Flight 241 on final approach to the San Francisco airport. The approach instrumentation was out, and everybody for the last week or so approaching knew that. In this particular incident, there were 3 qualified pilots in the cockpit, but none of them failed to recognize that they were too low and too slow. The results were very unfortunate. Let me contrast that with another aviation example. U.S. Airways Flight 1549, 3 minutes after departing LaGuardia Airport in New York, encountered a flock of Canadian geese. Captain Chesley Sullenberg and his co-pilot. Captain Sullenberg has over 19,000 hours. He's a former military pilot. He is a safety pilot, and he is also a glider pilot. Informed departure control, I'm going to put it on the Hudson. The conversation, I've listened to it, is chilling. He made that decision for that outcome at that instant. My point here is, if I'm on a commercial flight and there's a problem on that aircraft, I do not want the pilot Googling a solution. I want her to come up with it there and then, at that time, knowing what to do. So the first category of information of what we need to know is the stuff I would describe as urgent. You need it right now. Let's go to a second category. And I like to use as an example people like dancers and figure skaters and painters and musical performers. I always like to throw in hockey players. They perform well because of a considerable amount of practice that has been necessary for them to do that at that level of expertise. A hockey player is not thinking about skating. They are thinking about the game and the circumstances and the situation at that instant. So that is what they're after at that point for doing that. So the second one are the repetitions. The third category I call the nature of work. Herbert Simon made the comment that it'll be easier to get computers to replace what university professors do than to do what bulldozer operators do. And since I was in graduate school preparing to be a professor, I was sensitive to that comment. And so the part of it that concerned me was, what's the difference? The difference is the nature of the work, being able to interpret with experience that instant what's going on. Police officers do that. Parents do that all the time. So we'll classify it as the nature of work. The fourth category, I kept till last, is the most important one, and I will classify that as basics. Reading, writing, speaking, listening, some level of numeracy. Those all have to be inboard. Somebody told me a story of an employee they have that did not know in the pharmacy that 3/4 is greater than 1/2. That concerns me. In this category that I call basics, civics, history, policies, economics, finance, all of those things apply as well. I heard another example where an employee did not know what country is north of the United States. Kind of need to know that. The civics is important because no machine will replace us to make our decisions about what's going on in our communities, in our states, in our country, and internationally. We need to be engaged and involved, and we need to have that basic knowledge for doing that kind of things. It was Winston Churchill who said that it only takes a few minutes of a conversation with the average citizen to think that maybe democracy is not a good idea. That's scary for doing that. So why do I bring this up? It's because we need to have that knowledge, first of all, as humans, as citizens, as members of society, to train and to learn. And the second reason is to take advantage of all these other capabilities that are coming into play and the ease at which they are done. I came across a term the other day that really surprised me. It was referred to as digital detox. People who say, I'm going to spend a period of time completely void of any of it. And I'm thinking, if you try that and it's really hard, that's called an addiction because you're hooked on it. Well, I want to leave you with one last point, and that refers to my recurring nightmare. I'm ready for surgery. I'm on the operating table. Laying next to me on the table in a sterile bag is my surgeon's smartphone. And the surgeon comes in and he says, Siri, do I make a 3-inch incision or a 4-inch incision? And I wake up. That's too scary. We need to make sure that we are constantly learning with every opportunity that we have. But the thing that I want to caution against is what I call the serenity of the ease of being able to pull it from someplace else when maybe it should be here. And the second thing is the dependence on the rest of the information that is someplace else when that dependency may go too far. So I hope it's something to just rethink about. Thank you very much.